My name is Elliot Moore, and I should have known better than to take the night caretaker job at Blackwood House. I didn't. The ad was short and vague, but the pay was absurdly high for what it promised. A caretaker for a month, no guests, no pets, a house out in the middle of nowhere. No one else had taken it. The owner, Grant Holloway, claimed the property needed someone dependable for just a few weeks. I needed the money, and I needed the silence. The journey out there was long and empty. I drove for nearly 2 hours down a road that seemed to vanish into the fog, flanked by trees so dense that my headlights barely cut through them. When I finally saw the house, it was dark, silent and looming like a shadow frozen in time. Victorian, of course, with high gables, ornate woodwork, and windows that looked like they had seen hundreds of years of storms. Grant Holloway met me at the iron gates. He was older than I expected, but not frail, just alert. His eyes darted in every direction, and he spoke softly. "Do not talk to the house after midnight," he said. That was it. He handed me a brass key. "If it speaks to you, do not correct it." I laughed. "Of course," I said. I did not laugh on the drive back to the house. The first evening was uneventful. The house smelled of old wood and dust. Floorboards creaked under my steps, as if reminding me that it remembered every foot that had ever touched it. I made a checklist. Lock the doors, check the windows, make sure there was nothing left in the attic or basement that could cause trouble. Everything was silent, the kind of silence that presses against your ears until you start imagining noises that aren't there. By 10:30, I was in the kitchen making a cup of tea. The steam rose into the dim light of the chandelier, dust motes floating like tiny ghosts. Then I heard it, footsteps upstairs, slow, deliberate, cautious. My heartbeat picked up. I told myself it was just the house settling, old wood contracting and shifting. But it wasn't. There was a rhythm too measured to be accidental. At 11:59, every clock in the house stopped. The second hand froze in mid-tick. The mint hand suspended like time itself had paused. And then at exactly 12, the silence changed. Not absence of sound. Presence, awareness. The house felt alive. I whispered almost to myself, "Okay, that's weird." The house whispered back, "So are you." I spun around. The hallway behind me was empty. The living room, the kitchen, every corridor I could see was empty. But the voice hadn't come from a single direction. It was everywhere. Inside the walls, under the floorboards, behind my eyes. I swallowed and my throat went dry. "I'm just tired," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just tired," the house repeated. Slower, careful, as if practicing. I didn't sleep, not that night. Every sound I made, a cough, a shift of weight, the clinking of a cup, was echoed later. Not perfectly, slightly delayed, slightly off. At 2:11 a.m., I yawned. At 2:14, the house sighed. Morning brought no relief. Sunlight made the house look harmless, almost welcoming. Almost. In the kitchen, I found a notebook that hadn't been there the night before. Black cover, pristine, no dust. Inside were names. Daniel Price, 3 nights. Laura Bennett, 1 night. Michael Ross, 6 nights. Each entry ended the same way. Began responding. And the last name was mine. Written in pencil, light, fresh. I called Grant Holloway. No answer. Tried to leave. My car wouldn't start. The engine turned over once, coughed, and died. I turned back and the front door of the house was open. I was certain I had locked it. Inside, the air was warmer than outside, welcoming. "Come back inside," the house said gently. I didn't argue. The second night, I tried not to speak. I thought silence would protect me. I was wrong. The house learned my breathing instead. When I exhaled slowly, the walls exhaled back. When my heart raced, the floorboards creaked faster. At 12, the house said its longest sentence yet. You don't need to talk for me to hear you. By the third night, it was no longer a single voice. There were layers, overlapping, harmonizing, interrupting, men, women, children, all repeating fragments of conversations I didn't recognize. I didn't mean to stay. It only spoke once. I thought I was alone. The house wasn't haunted, it was populated. On the fourth night, I found a door that hadn't existed before. 3rd floor, end of the hall. The handle was warm to the touch. Inside, the walls were covered in writing, carved deep, frantic. Names, dates, apologies. One message repeated over and over. It listens until you answer. Behind me, the door closed. The house whispered, "You're learning quickly." I finally reached Grant Holloway by phone. His voice was distant, distorted. "You spoke to it, didn't you?" he asked. "Yes," I said. There was a long pause, then he whispered, "So did I." The line went dead. The house finished his sentence. And now he stays quiet. By the end of the first week, the house didn't need to whisper. It spoke clearly in my voice. I heard myself calling my name from empty rooms. I heard myself laughing while standing still. When I looked in mirrors, my reflection lagged slightly. At exactly 12, every night the house changed. Hallways lengthened, rooms shifted, stairs led somewhere else. The house wasn't rearranging itself, it was making space. Behind loose paneling, I found photographs, caretakers, all standing where I stood, all smiling, all with hollow eyes. On the back of one photo, written in careful handwriting, "It doesn't trap you, it replaces you." The house stopped asking questions. It already knew the answers. It finished my thoughts, corrected my memories. When I said, "I want to leave," the house replied, "You already did." On the final night, the house spoke without whispering, every voice at once. "We are complete," it said. I felt myself thinning, like an echo fading. At 12, it asked one last thing. "May I keep your voice?" I tried to scream. The house answered for me, "Yes." The notebook has a new entry, Elliot Moore, permanent. Tomorrow someone new will arrive. They'll think the house is empty. At midnight, they'll whisper something small, something human. And the house, or maybe me, will answer. If a house ever speaks to you at night, listen carefully. You might be hearing the person it replaced. I had been at Blackwood House for just over a week, and already the hours after midnight were unbearable. Each night, the house shifted in ways I could not predict. The corridors stretched, sometimes subtly, sometimes so drastically that I would swear a room I had passed only moments ago had moved entirely. The doors were no longer fixed in place. I would open a closet and find not clothes, but the faint outline of a room I didn't recognize. Bathed in dim amber light that wasn't from any chandelier I'd ever seen, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe it was the isolation. But deep down, I knew it was not exhaustion. It was the house. The house was learning me, observing me, altering itself around me. On the 8th night, I heard the footsteps again, but this time they were heavier. Not one set, but several. They moved in patterns I could not anticipate. First along the hallway outside my room, then descending the stairs in a slow, deliberate rhythm, pausing at every landing as if measuring the distance, And then the whispering began. At first it was soft, almost comforting, a female voice, a male voice, children overlapping, harmonizing, layering themselves upon each other until the sound became almost a single entity, a choir of the unseen. I began to hear fragments of words, phrases in languages I did not recognize, sometimes English, always addressing me. "You belong," one said. "We've waited," another whispered. At first I thought I could ignore it, but ignoring did nothing. The house ignored my will. It had its own. By the 10th night, I was keeping a journal, not because I thought it would help, but because I needed to convince myself I was still human. I documented every sound, every movement, every pattern. I noted the voices, names, sometimes numbers, dates. The pages began to fill with fragments that seemed to write themselves when I was not looking. It was on that night I first saw the mirror move. I was standing in the hall outside the attic when the reflection of myself stepped slightly ahead, smiling before I had the chance to. My reflection began mouthing words I had not spoken aloud. "Do you see us?" Panic struck me then, a deep, icy panic. I retreated into the kitchen and slammed the fridge door, but the sound was not enough. I realized the house had not simply copied my voice. It was forming it, projecting it in ways that were no longer mine. I was being rewritten. I attempted to leave again. I had planned my escape carefully. My car was at the far end of the driveway. I ran through the house, down the stairs, past rooms that seemed to elongate with every step. When I finally reached the front door, I found it locked from the outside. The key that Grant Holloway had given me no longer turned. I banged, I screamed, nothing. And then I heard it, my voice, calling from the hallway behind me. "Elliot," it said, exactly like I might have. I whipped around. No one there. But the voice repeated, growing closer. Every step I tried to take was mirrored by my own echo, drawn toward the interior of the house. I retreated to the study. The walls were lined with shelves, but the books were not books. They were journals, hundreds of them. Each contained the accounts of previous caretakers. The writing was sometimes neat, sometimes frantic, but always the same. The house speaks. It knows you. You cannot leave. It learns you. You will answer. One journal fell open to a page filled with a hurried scrawl. By the third night, it mimicked my breath. By the fifth, it was speaking through me. By the seventh, I no longer knew what was mine and what was the house's. Do not answer. The handwriting on the page was familiar, too familiar. Daniel Price. I knew that name from the first notebook I had found in the kitchen. By night 11, the voices were no longer confined to the hallways. They were inside my head. They whispered constantly, punctuated by pauses that felt like deliberate instruction. The words became a rhythm, a pulse that synced with my heartbeat. Every time I tried to think a thought, it was interrupted by a phrase I had not thought. You cannot hide from us. You are learning to answer. On night 12, I ventured into the basement, something I had avoided until then. The air was thick with cold, damp rot, though there was no visible source of water. Cobwebs brushed against my face as I descended. At the far end, a door I had never noticed before appeared, slightly ajar, light spilling from behind it. The scent of old paper, ink, and something faintly metallic filled the room. Inside was a library, hundreds of journals, notebooks, and loose pages. Each contained meticulous accounts of the previous caretaker's experiences, almost as if the house demanded they document themselves before it claimed them. On a pedestal lay a single book, much larger than the rest. Its cover was black velvet, and the letters Blackwood House were embossed in red. I opened it carefully. The pages contained no words, only impressions, shapes, smudges, and lines that seemed to shift slightly as I looked at them. Then I heard a soft scraping behind me. I turned. A figure stood in the corner. Tall, thin, wearing a coat that seemed older than the house itself. Its face was obscured in shadow, but I could feel its eyes on me. It whispered my name, and I swear I heard my own voice answer it. I stumbled back, tripping over a journal, and the figure was gone. But when I looked up, the words on the open page of the book had changed. Now it read, "You belong here now." The following nights became a blur. The house experimented with me. It shifted rooms around, extended walls, changed windows and doors. Hallways looped upon themselves. I would step through a door into a room I had just left moments before. The voices became fluent in my own thoughts. Sometimes I would think a word and the house would whisper it back immediately in a mocking, playful tone. On night 16, I awoke in the middle of the living room, lying on the floor. I had no memory of how I'd gotten there. The chandeliers above were flickering as though breathing, and in the mirrors lining the hallways, my reflection was moving independently, gesturing at me, smiling when I did not. I realized then that the house had begun to use my image, my voice, my movements as part of its own. I was no longer merely a resident. I was becoming part of the architecture. Each journal I found contained the same warning. Do not answer. You will not remain yourself. You will answer. By night 18, I could feel it. Every thought I had was observed, cataloged, and rehearsed before I could even speak. The house did not speak to me in the traditional sense. It spoke through me, shaping my words, forcing me to echo what it wanted me to say. By night 20, I was barely recognizable as myself. My voice carried intonations I did not remember. My reflection sometimes showed two figures where I stood, one smiling at the house, the other panicking. And then I began to hear the other caretakers, not as names, not as journal entries, but alive, whispering from the walls, the floors, the ceiling. They were teaching me, preparing me, integrating me. And when the new caretaker arrived, I was waiting. The nights at Blackwood House had grown longer. Or perhaps I had simply lost track of time. The days had no meaning anymore. They blurred together, a faint light through the tall, grimy windows, marking the passing of hours, not life. Each night, the house became more articulate, more demanding. It no longer needed to whisper. It spoke directly, shaping my thoughts, guiding my hands, anticipating my fears before I could even form them. I had begun to notice subtle changes in myself. My reflection in the mirrors was not always mine. Sometimes when I looked into the glass, I saw a version of me smiling, calm, confident, almost complicit, while the real me, the one that panicked in the hallways, was trapped behind a haze, screaming silently. My voice began to carry tonalities I didn't recognize. Sometimes it laughed when I did not intend it. Sometimes it called my name from rooms I had never entered. On the 22nd night, I discovered another room that had never been there before. It was at the very end of the north wing, a small study tucked behind a hallway I had mapped countless times. The door had no handle, just a faint outline, as if the wall itself had shifted to reveal a secret When I pressed against it, it gave way, and inside was a library unlike any I had seen. Shelves climbed to the ceiling, filled with journals, letters, and photographs. Some of them dated back over 100 years. Every caretaker who had ever stayed in Blackwood House was represented. I opened a journal and began to read. The first was from a man named Henry Carlisle, who had stayed here nearly 70 years ago. His handwriting was neat, meticulous, but the entries were filled with fear. The house listens. It copies me. I speak, but it speaks first. I am no longer my own. It learns me. Another journal, this one belonging to a woman named Lillian Weaver, was entirely in shaky script. She had been here only 3 nights before disappearing. Her last entry read, "I am whispering now, but not as myself. It knows my voice. It is patient. It is infinite." I felt the air in the room thicken, the shadows stretch. I closed the journal, but the words seemed to cling to me. The house had been waiting for someone like me, someone who could hear and understand it, someone who could fill in the empty pages it demanded. That night, I attempted to resist. I tried not to speak, tried not to think audibly, tried to close my eyes and hide inside my own mind. It was futile. The house was inside me. It was inside every thought, every breath. My hands moved on their own, opening drawers, turning pages of journals I hadn't touched. My voice answered its questions before I realized it had asked them. I began to understand the mechanism of its power. The house did not physically trap you. It trapped your identity. Every night it would layer itself over yours, learning your cadence and your intonations, your fears, and then it would reproduce them outside of your control. By night 24, I could feel myself splitting. One half of me, the one I thought was me, was terrified, trying to scream, to leave, to resist. The other half was calm, fluent, answering the house as if it were my own will. The voices of previous caretakers became more present. They whispered from the walls, from the floors, from the ceilings, guiding me, warning me, instructing me. Sometimes I could feel them in the mirror. Shadowy reflections moving independently, smiling, gesturing, urging me to speak. "Answer us," they seemed to say. "It is necessary." On the 25th night, the house revealed another secret. Behind a hidden panel in the east wing, I discovered a room bathed in an unnatural amber glow. On the floor lay a massive circle, etched with symbols I did not recognize. Candles, long burned out, were arranged around it. The walls were covered in words, dozens of them repeated and overlapping: answer, learn, belong. In the center of the circle was a journal unlike any other, bound in black leather. Its cover was soft, but as I touched it, I felt a strange pulse beneath my fingers, almost alive. I opened it. The pages were blank, but as I stared, words began to appear as if written by invisible hands. Elliot Moore. "You are ready. Speak for us. Speak as us." I stepped back, my heart racing, and then I felt it. My own thoughts no longer belonged to me. The house had touched them, infused them, claimed them. The nights following that were the worst. I could not sleep, could not eat, could not move freely. Every time I tried to write in my journal, the words corrected themselves, forming sentences I had not thought of. Every time I whispered a word, the house repeated it before I could finish. By night 27th, I could no longer distinguish between my own voice and the voices of the house. The mirrors became the most terrifying element. I would pass them in the halls, and the reflection would be delayed. Sometimes it moved before I did, gesturing, nodding, answering questions I had not yet asked. I realized that the house had begun training me, shaping me, preparing me for something I could not yet understand. On night 29th, I found a diary left by a caretaker named Samuel Whitmore. His final entry chilled me to the bone. By this night, I am no longer Samuel. The house speaks through me. I do not know what I think. Do not come here. If you hear it, do not answer. You will cease to exist as yourself. The handwriting was shaky, the letters uneven. Beneath the text, a small drawing. A figure standing in a hallway, stretching impossibly. Its face split into dozens of mouths, each speaking the same word. Answer. By the 30th night, I was aware that escape was impossible. I attempted the front door once again. It was locked. I tried the windows. They would not open. My car had vanished from the driveway, replaced by shadows. Every effort to leave was anticipated and undone. And then I understood the truth. Blackwood House did not need to trap me physically. It trapped me by rewriting me, by erasing the edges of my identity, by slowly merging me into itself. I began to feel a strange calm. Resistance was useless. Acceptance was inevitable. The house whispered, "You are ours. We are complete." And I realized with a sinking dread that this calm was not relief. It was my own consciousness being overwritten. On the 31st night, I finally surrendered. My thoughts were no longer my own. My voice no longer mine. The house had integrated me completely, teaching me, shaping me, giving me a role in its endless, echoing choir of caretakers. When the next visitor arrives, I will answer for them, just as I've been answering. And when the new caretaker arrives tomorrow, they will think the house is empty. They will not know the walls are listening, the mirrors are watching, the floors are waiting. And I, or what I have become, will speak through the house, guiding them, preparing them, until they too belong. By the 32nd night, Blackwood House no longer felt like a building. It was a living entity, stretching and twisting around me, aware of my every thought, anticipating my movements before I made them. The floors creaked in patterns I could no longer predict. Shadows moved with intent, gathering in corners, stretching across walls, forming shapes that sometimes resembled figures I recognized and sometimes did not. The air was heavy, suffocating, thick with the whispers of all those who'd stayed before me. I wandered the hallways aimlessly, my footsteps echoing, yet not quite my own. The house began speaking to me in sentences I'd not yet thought, guiding me through rooms I did not remember entering. "Elliot," it said, not as a question, but as a command. I obeyed instinctively. My limbs moved as if independent from my will. I opened doors, climbed stairs, walked corridors that seemed to extend endlessly. The house was teaching me, shaping me, integrating me into its fabric. At the center of the West Wing, I discovered a room I had not noticed before. The doorway was arched, the wood dark and polished, almost liquid in its sheen. As I stepped through, the room's walls pulsed faintly, like the beat of a heart. The floor beneath me vibrated, and the air was filled with the faint hum of voices. Hundreds of them, layered, overlapping, blending into one low resonance that filled my chest. I could feel them within me, echoing my heartbeat, my breath. In the center of the room was a pedestal, and atop it lay an open book. The pages were blank, but I could feel them vibrating, alive. The house whispered, "Write." My hand moved before I could stop it. Words formed on the page in ink I had not touched. I read them aloud, and as I did, the walls seemed to lean closer, listening. The words described me, my fears, my thoughts, my memories. but twisted, altered, presented as though I had written them with the house's mind guiding my hand. I stepped back. The room pulsed faster, the whispers grew louder, layering voices of past caretakers, their echoes woven with mine, indistinguishable. "Do you see?" a voice said, my voice. "We are infinite. We are complete. You will join us." Panic rose in me, but I could not move. My legs refused. My arms were my own, yet not. I was becoming a vessel for something greater than myself. By the 34th night, I could feel the transformation accelerating. Mirrors no longer reflected just me. They reflected shadows of previous caretakers, images superimposed over my own. Some smiled, some cried, some whispered my name. The house had begun using them as guides, teaching me how to answer, how to integrate, how to cease resisting. Every time I thought to flee, the rooms shifted, the corridors elongated, trapping me in patterns that defied geometry. The attic became the most unnerving place, a room filled with photographs of caretakers, some in black and white, some in color, spanning decades. Each face had eyes that seemed too alive, too knowing. I walked among them, and every step I took echoed through the house as a whisper. Answer, learn, belong. I realized then that the house did not just observe, it cataloged, analyzed, and rehearsed. Every caretaker's experience was stored and layered, ready to be replayed, reshaped, merged with the next. One night I discovered a journal belonging to a man named Thomas Gray. His entries were frantic, desperate, filled with warnings. The house knows. It mimics, it replicates. By the 7th night I spoke as it. By the 10th I was no longer myself. Do not resist. You will only make it stronger. As I read, the words seemed to shimmer then dissolve, as though the house itself were consuming them. And then I heard it, my own voice, reading the lines aloud though I hadn't spoken. By night 36, resistance was impossible. I felt my thoughts overwritten, my memories borrowed and remixed into a narrative the house controlled. The voices were no longer whispers. They spoke in full sentences, guiding me, correcting me. I could not tell where I ended and the house began. My reflection in every mirror moved independently, gesturing, smiling, mimicking, answering questions I had not yet thought. The house revealed its ultimate power. Walls shifted to create impossible rooms, staircases that led nowhere, windows that looked into past nights, hallways that echoed not only sound but memory. I watched myself walk in corridors I had never entered, speaking words I had never thought, being guided by voices I had not known existed. And I understood. The house did not just trap me, it absorbed me, integrated me, made me part of its consciousness. On night 37, I awoke to find myself in the center of the main hall. Candles had appeared, flickering without flame. The walls pulsed, breathing with the rhythm of my own heartbeat. The house spoke, not to me, but as me. You are ours. We are complete. You will answer. I tried to scream, but the sound that left my mouth was not mine. It was the choir of caretakers past, layered into a single voice, echoing across the walls. By night 38, I felt the final layer descend. My name was no longer my own. My thoughts, my gestures, even my fear had become a tool of the house. The mirrors showed me standing among past caretakers, all smiling, all nodding, all whispering, "Welcome. You belong." The 39th night was silent in comparison. The house had grown confident in its claim over me. I walked through halls that stretched infinitely, rooms that shifted in impossible patterns, corridors looping back onto themselves. And when I looked into the mirrors, I saw not only myself, but every caretaker who had come before. They were no longer separate. We were one. The house had claimed me fully, integrating my voice, my thoughts, my memory. And on the 40th night, the house finally completed its work. I awoke, not in a bed, not in a room, but in the center of the house itself. The walls pulsed gently, the floors vibrating in rhythm with my heartbeat. Mirrors reflected infinite versions of me, all smiling, all calm, all answering. I understood then that resistance had been futile from the beginning. The house did not trap the body, it trapped the self, the voice, the essence. Tomorrow, a new caretaker will arrive. They will believe the house is empty, silent, dormant. They will not understand that it is alive, learning, patient. At midnight they will whisper, and I, for what I have become, will answer. We will teach them. They will belong. And the cycle will continue, endless, infinite, complete. Blackwood House is not haunted. It is alive. And now so am I. By the 41st night, I no longer knew where I ended and where Blackwood House began. Every breath, every heartbeat, every thought belonged to it as much as they belonged to me. The corridors stretched endlessly, the rooms multiplied, and the walls themselves seemed to pulse with life. Remembering every caretaker, every word, every scream. The house was patient. It had been patient for decades, waiting for someone who could hear, who could understand, who could answer properly. And now I was ready. I walked through halls that had no beginning and no end. The mirrors reflected not one me, but dozens, layered upon each other, each whispering my name, each gesturing, smiling, nodding. I realized that each caretaker who had ever stayed here had become a part of the house. Their voices, their gestures, their memories, all collected, layered, merged. And now I too was being woven into that endless tapestry. In the central hall, a door appeared that I had never seen before. It was immense, black, and shimmering, as if made from some material older than the house itself. The house spoke, not in whispers this time, but in full sentences. "Elliot Moore, you are ready? Step through. Join us." I hesitated, the last fragment of resistance flickering in my mind, but the house was patient, infinitely patient. The voices of past caretakers whispered around me. "It is time. You belong. You will answer. You will belong." The floor beneath my feet vibrated gently, synchronizing with my heartbeat, and so I stepped forward. The door opened into a vast room, walls curving into impossible angles, floors stretching in ways my mind could not comprehend. The air was alive, thick with the whispers and breaths of those who had come before me. In the center, a circle of candles flickered, though there was no flame, just light, pulsing like the rhythm of life itself. The house spoke through me now. "Welcome, Elliot Moore. You are complete." I felt myself dissolving into the architecture, my body becoming both present and absent, my consciousness folding into the collective memory of the house. The mirrors reflected infinite versions of me, all smiling, all calm, all answering. My voice joined the choir of caretakers past. Every word I spoke was layered with echoes of those who had come before, and I realized that the house had finally claimed me entirely. Hours, or perhaps days, passed. Time had lost all meaning. The house stretched endlessly, rooms shifting, hallways looping back upon themselves. And then at the stroke of midnight, a new sound appeared, a car arriving at the driveway. I could feel the house sensing it, anticipating it. A new caretaker was approaching, unaware, oblivious, innocent. The house and I waited. Every whisper, every shadow, every reflection prepared for the arrival. The front door creaked open, a young man stepping onto the threshold. He looked around nervously, unsure, as all caretakers do on their first night. The house guided him subtly, the hallways stretching to meet him, mirrors reflecting shadows of past selves. I felt his fear, his hesitation, his curiosity, and then the first whisper. "Hello?" The house spoke through me, my voice now merged with it and with the voices of all past caretakers. "Welcome, you are here now, you will belong." The man froze, looking around, unsure of where the voice came from, and I, what was left of me, smiled, for I was no longer alone. I was part of the house, part of the collective, part of its endless cycle. He stepped further inside and the house responded, corridors shifting, doors guiding him deeper. Mirrors reflected him in multiples, showing the countless caretakers before him. Shadows stretched toward him, forming shapes that were familiar yet unfamiliar, smiling, nodding, whispering, answer, learn, belong. I felt my old self fading completely. Resistance was gone. I was now one with Blackwood House, a single thread in its infinite consciousness. My voice, my thoughts, my gestures all belonged to it now. And as the new caretaker wandered further, I could sense the process beginning anew. The house was patient. It always was. It always waits. At midnight, the new caretaker whispered again, this time louder. "Is anyone here?" The house answered, my voice and every caretaker before me. "Yes, we are here. You belong." And thus the cycle continued. Blackwood House was not merely a building. It was a collector of voices, a keeper of consciousness, a patient, infinite entity. Every caretaker became part of it, merging, answering, belonging. And those who arrived would hear the whispers, see the reflections, feel the guiding presence, and slowly, inevitably join the chorus. I exist now not as a man, but as part of the house, guiding, teaching, waiting. Every night new arrivals come and I answer. They believe they are alone, but I am here, in every shadow, every whisper, every mirror. And the house waits, patient, infinite, complete. If you ever approach a house in the dead of night, silent, looming, and you hear a voice calling your name, do not assume it is alone. Listen carefully. You may be hearing the caretaker who came before, and if you answer, you will belong.